years. So thank you TEDx and thank you Shivaji College for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to relive some of my college memories ever since I left the university many years. That I'm a wildlife photographer. Let's rewind back and go before 2009 when I graduated out of Delhi University from Shivang College of Commerce, and then I started studying journalism. And from journalism, I moved on into a PR and corporate communications role, and that was a job which I loved to do. But there was a parallel life which I was leading, and it was a life where I did not waste any kind of opportunity which was presented to me to be there out in nature, engaging in any kind of outdoor activities, whether it was river rafting or hiking, being out there in the forest. And as a young kid that time, I grew up reading books written by the legendary Jim Corbett. How many of you have read books written by Jim Corbett? Okay, so some of the iconic books like Man-Eaters of Kumaon and Man-Eating Leopards of Rudraprayag. And I felt, he was a very iconic writer because he had that unique style of transporting a person to that particular landscape. It was like a screenplay which was written by someone. And having read those books, I finally landed in the Corbett habitat in search of all those visuals which I grew up reading. And for me, it was a very interesting part of my journey where I used to just explore that particular landscape just to figure out, oh, he has written something like this, where could this be? And it was such a great visual depiction which he had done in his writings, and that is what inspired me and instilled that great feeling of love and respect towards the natural world, and especially the forests of Kumaon at that point of time. But I soon understood, while I was still working as a corporate professional, I decided to take a leap, and I trained myself as a naturalist while working in that particular landscape. And I joined a small campsite in the outskirts of Corbett. My only objective was to spend as much time as possible in the field so that I can observe nature and I can observe the natural world from a closer perspective. And these were the kind of visuals I used to get up to early in the morning. And it was a stark difference from what I used to see out here in Delhi, where you stand in your balcony and you'll see a crowd of vehicles. And there was a colony of butterflies which I used to observe every day in the morning that time. Over a period of time, equipped with a very basic camera which I had bought, I ended up documenting around 150 odd species of birds right around my camp, in a period of 3-4. And it was a period where I loved exploring the forest on foot because, when you are on foot, you're outside the comfort of a vehicle. You are able to observe nature more closely. You're able to read the signs of the forest more closely. As trails, I just bumped into a very beautiful looking species of bird. So that's a green magpie, a beautiful species of bird belonging to the magpie family. It's found in the lower foothills of the Himalayas, very prominent in the Kumaon landscape as well. And I just happened to photograph this green magpie. I just came back casually to my camp, and there was this group of international birders who were sitting in front of me, and I just showed them this image. I just look what I found. And they just went flabbergasted. They all wanted, can you show us this species? I said, yeah, tomorrow morning we'll go out for a walk. I'll show you the spot. So I took them in the morning, I took them to the spot. There was this green magpie which was hopping around. They all picked up their big fancy cameras and took some beautiful images. And after that session got over, there were 4 of them, and each of them, they gave me 500. They put that 2,000 rupees in my hand. And for the first time, I felt that, I've earned something from the field of wildlife. So can I make this my profession? And then this particular bird became my first business. I took a lot of people in some areas in the Corbett landscape who wanted to see the green magpie. They all photographed the green magpie. Over a period of time, I utilized that money along with the savings I had from my corporate life to just graduate a bit. And because I used to aspire to buy all those big fancy lenses which they were using to photograph this particular bird and various other things which they used to do when I used to guide them. And so I picked up my first fancy lens, a good prime lens. And suddenly, the moment you pick up a camera like this, you start feeling like a wildlife photographer, that you have arrived. And that's what I started feeling. And with that feeling, I started exploring the landscape where I was living in with more curiosity and with a more, authoritative flavor that now I'm going to nail it. Why? Because I'm armed with equipments like this. But slowly, after a few years, I realized there was a change which was happening within me. And there were times when there were tigers lazing around on water holes. And I was sitting there in the car, in the vehicle, and this tiger was sitting at a water hole, and I was out with a Nokia 1000 rupees phone playing a game of snakes and not doing anything. And this thing continued to happen repeatedly. And suddenly I started questioning myself that, I left a full-fledged corporate career to get into all these things because I enjoy all these things. I mean, this is something which I love doing, being there in the outdoors. I'm still enjoying being out here in the forest. But what am I doing as a photographer? I mean, I'm supposed to use this camera, but this camera is lying dormant. Why? Because I have this kind of a thought process in my mind that this is something which I have done a lot of times. This tiger sitting in the water hole. I've photographed these kind of sequences a lot of times. So there's nothing new which is actually hooked towards chasing those kind of rare moments and photographing them only when those things happen. So essentially that meant that for a majority of time I was not picking up the camera because nothing was happening in front of me. And every time I felt that, this is something which I've seen earlier also. So there were a lot of questions which started coming into my mind. And as a photographer, so some of the questions which constantly I was asking myself was that, what was I chasing sharper? So I was chasing sharpness. Each and every strand of hair on on the face of the tiger should be such that I can count it. That should be the level of sharpness just because I'm using this fancy camera. As I said, I was chasing natural history and moments in the wild. And I was purely doing documentation. So documentation of those 150 odd species of birds which I talked about in the beginning, only the standard of documentation over the years, while my wildlife knowledge and my learning curve as a wildlife professional was increasing drastically, but my photographic learning curve had become very, very constant. I was not going anywhere. And that is something which started bothering me as a photographer. And I was questioning myself that whether did I do the right thing by picking up a camera, or I should just have been happy being a field wildlife professional, guiding people, showing them various stuff, working on complex projects where I find certain species and make someone else photograph it. So was it the right choice for me to become a photographer? It took me a bit of time to realize and understand that particular critical element of photography, because photography is also a form of art. And since historic times, photography has been perceived as a form of art. And the art element of photography, I realized, is a never-ending learning process because, you keep on evolving as an artist. So the next question which I had in my mind was, so what does an artist do? An artist who is a photographer. So what is his role? What does he do? So essentially, as an artist, every day an artist steps out from his bed in order to pick up his camera and he goes out in the field to explore the world. He is going with an intention to create. So create is something which an artist does. And that is something which each and every photographer on the planet, each and every good photographer on the planet, he does. And a great photographer is his ability to create. It's his ability to figure out those small little things, small little elements in this 360-degree sphere of nature, which can tell a very, very yeah, that's right. That's a dune, a sand dune. Just a shaft of light is falling on a small patch of sand dune somewhere in the deserts. Going back to the same grasslands in Corbett National Park, where I used to see all those elephants and wait for those moments where some kind of a tussle will happen between two elephants. A mother will start interacting with the calf, or two calves are playing together. Going back to the same habitats and figuring out the simplicity of those habitats, exploring those particular habitats in different moods, different seasons, in order to create impactful images, in order to depict a moody forest. So that is something which motivated me to shoot again. For that matter, even considering the national animal of this country, the tiger, which is probably the most photographed species in today's time in India. I mean, every person in India, or an international photographer or an international tourist who wants to come to India in order to see any kind of Indian wildlife, the objective for me became that how creatively I can make use of the fact that I'm born in this country and I have access to this particular animal to come out with a compelling image which forces my audience to look at that particular animal in a different light. And it is really relevant for a lot of you photography enthusiasts, in case you are interested in using cameras in today's world, because today when you open any kind of a social media platform, say, if you just open Instagram, what is happening out there? It is full of a tsunami of, creative pollution. And the effectiveness with which a photographer can capture the mind of his audience, even for a fraction of a second out there, so that your thumb stops, swiping up and down and your thumb stops there. That means, the photographer has been able to create some kind of an emotional connection using the medium of his image with you. So that is what creativity is all about. I landed up in Bandhavgarh National Park in central India, and this was in early 2010, where I came across this particular tigress. Now, what was so special about this particular tiger? If you observe closely, this tigress has got one eye. And the obvious thing which comes into the mind of a photographer who is a storyteller is curiosity. So this tigress engaged in a territorial fight with another tigress, and in that rage, she killed that particular tigress, and in that fight, she ended up losing her one eye. For a lot of photographers, she was not a photogenic tiger, because photographers need a beautiful tiger face to photograph, and this tigress had just one eye. So people used to put the cameras down as soon as she used to walk out of the bushes. But for me, there was this curiosity that with this kind of a limitation, she has fought for a crown because of all this battle and bloodshed. She has finally acquired this, the prime piece of tiger real estate, as you can call it, in Bandhavgarh. It was one of the most happening areas when it came to tigers in Bandhavgarh. Lots of food in terms of prey availability, lots of water. If any tiger in the world would dream to occupy that kind of area, and she did it. But with this kind of a physical limitation, I was very curious to know that how will she survive? I mean, this crown has been earned, but whether she'll be able to retain this crown or not. Because eventually she's supposed to find a mate, and then she's supposed to give birth to cubs. And an apex predator like a tiger with a physical limitation like this, the basic question was, how will it hunt? With that curiosity, I started following the life of this particular tigress, and I thought that if one image can speak 1,000 words, so maybe in a period of 4-5 years, and if I start documenting her journey, I'll have this series of images. And just imagine 100 images that everything can be compiled together with some powerful narrative and that becomes a great content for a book. And even before writing the book, I gave the name of the book called Vijaya, the Warrior Queen, and I started working on that. Over a period of 3-4 years, she did mate, and she gave birth to cubs. She raised the cubs to an age of 18 months, and there was another male tiger which came and killed those cubs. Then she mated again. She again gave birth to cubs, and sometime in the August of 2014, I got a call that she, along with the cubs, have died. And then I was left with this plethora of content for 4 years, this bank of images where, it was all about her life. It was like my dreams had shattered, my dreams of doing my first book. They were all shattered because I was thinking, what will I do with the incomplete story? The story has not reached its conclusion. But again, as a storyteller, I began to understand the fact that stories are not bound to reach to a definitive conclusion. It's about the storyteller to ensure that he needs to figure out a way that stories do reach up to a particular conclusion. And that's when I started thinking that this is a kind of an exercise which I've done with a lot of other tigers also in various parts of the country and in various other national parks where I've followed their life. And somehow I can start looking at that particular stories, and I can compile all these stories together to form a larger cumulative story. Is that we also live in a country where wildlife is very deeply rooted in our culture. And because of that, for years, people in this country, they have been surviving with wildlife. And not a lot has been talked about when it comes to stories of coexistence, where humans are coexisting with people. And that is something which fascinated me a lot of times, and that is what took me to this very remote area in Rajasthan, in the barren landscape of Rajasthan, where these leopards, they had been surviving with people. So every night, this leopard would come out from its cave in order to hunt. But remember, there is no natural, only prey base the leopard has is livestock. Livestock belonging to these communities and these tribal communities, these nomadic tribes which have been living in this area for years. And every day the leopard would come and pick up one of the goats and survive on that. But still, there wasn't any case of human-animal conflict because of this happening in this particular area for years. Why? Because this particular nomadic tribe, they really worship the leopard, and they came from a religious belief. They all worshipped Shiva, and they felt that Shiva wears a leopard skin, he sits on a tiger skin, and they had these kind of beliefs because of which they really worship the leopard. And if the leopard used to come and kill their goats, they felt that it's an offering from our side to the leopard. And because of these kind of beliefs, there was no case of conflict for years. And that became a very, very interesting story for me to capture in my third book, which was called The Leopards and Shepherds of Jawai. And for a lot of people who probably would have seen on my social media profile, this is the latest book which I've done, which is called The Colors of Black and White, where I've collaborated with a writer who comes from a completely non-wildlife background, where she's trying to interpret my work, and she's trying to draw various kind of connects on how and what we can learn from Mother Nature as humans. So the process of compiling books, that is something which I'm showing you just to tell you that images done by, if any of you are photography enthusiasts, you want to become photographers, or you want to pursue it as a hobby, images have no value till the time they are lying in your hard drives. They need to come out of your hard drives, they need to start connecting with people, they need to start compelling stories. And that is the kind of value, that is the kind of input you are creating as a photographer by talking to your audience in some. When I look back at my 2 decades of journey as a wildlife photographer, a lot of times I think that what has nature taught me and what has wildlife photography taught me? It has not taught me to take good onion pictures, but I've come to the conclusion that great images, now this is not about wildlife images, the great images taken in the world are done not because of the fact that they are created in the camera. Great images are first created in the mind. A photographer first pre-visualizes those images. And the camera is just a mere tool to execute what the mind has thought. Because the moment you start considering every project you do as a piece of onion, and you start peeling the layers of those onions, you are actually dissecting each and every element of this project to the minutest level, so that you cannot go wrong. Because remember, in nature, there are no second chances. If I miss a moment, it is gone for till the time we have done that particular process of peeling that particular onion and its various layers. The outcome is something we should not be worried about, because the outcome is something which, only Mother Nature can tell whether you'll get the outcome. In life, we will see our upswings, we will see our downswings. But we have this tendency to keep thinking about the upswings, and we start ignoring our. So as a concluding statement, I would just like to bring you back to 2009, where this famous man made this famous comment that life is a race. So I completely disagree with this, because life for me is not a race. Life is an onion. So keep on peeling various layers of that onion. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for